Live from Studio A, somewhere inside the great state of Kansas, it's Leadership Late Night, brought to you by the Kansas Leadership Center. I'm your announcer, DJ AJ. Joining my dad on tonight's show from Minneapolis, Davis and Dave Scherer. Now, your host, my dad, DJ Whetter.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Leadership Late Night. Things are obviously going to be a little bit different tonight. Addison, other than that terrific intro, has the night off, as does Parker. And the majority of our time together is going to be spent with our guests, focused on the events in this country over the last week surrounding the killing of George Floyd. When I started this late show experiment, the hope was that given the times, there might be an intersection between humor and leadership that we could use this platform to explore. Or at the very least, at a time where so much of the world was quarantined, I could engage my kiddos in a little bit of my work. For those of you who have watched the show in the past, you've seen the fun we've had together exploring this idea that leadership is an activity. Hell, it's the main reason most of you watch, to see Addison and Parker. This week, for the first time in their lives, I had to engage them in a different type of my work. I had to explain to them that we live in a world where systemic racism continues to impact every corner of this country and every one of us, whether we admit it or not. I know my race gives me privilege, and one of those privileges is that I can ignore that fact for the most part anytime I want to. Since last Monday, that's been harder to do. And I know for my friends and colleagues, especially those of you whose skin color looks different than mine, you haven't been able to avoid tough conversations with your children about race like I have. In our house, we've had plenty of conversations about how we respect all people and should try to learn about what makes us special and different. But that conversation isn't even close to the conversation we had last night. I was watching some of the protests when Addison and Parker told me it was time for dinner. But immediately, their eyes were glued to the TV, watching the marches around the country flashing on the screen in New York, LA, Minneapolis, Atlanta, and even in Kansas City. Addison asked what was happening, and I told them. I explained to them what happened to George Floyd, and I explained why people were crying and chanting in the streets all over this country. Parker had a few questions and headed off. Addison needed more, and we sat in the discomfort until she turned to me with tears in her eyes and said, "I don't understand why someone would treat another person that way." Seems so simple. We know it's not. And instead of engaging in that work of understanding why we can't seem to understand each other, instead of that, we endlessly debate what a proper protest looks like and what the proper response is to police violence, and how to properly respect the American flag at a football game. Frankly, I'm not interested in what's proper anymore. I'm interested in a world where we sit in the mess that we've created, especially my white brothers and sisters. We have a lot of work to do, and we have a large role to play in that work. This is our mess, but that's good news, because when you admit you are part of the mess, or are the mess, you can also be a part of the progress. So I hope tonight you'll sit in on a conversation with two men I respect deeply for the work they are doing in Minneapolis right now and the work they were engaged in long before last Monday. In a moment, I'll welcome Davis and Dave Scherer to the show. But first, I'd like you to learn a little bit about them. Take a look.
We were each called to this place, this time in the season. You may not yet know the rhyme or the reason. You may not feel, think, or believe in the same things I believe in, but we've been asked to show up.
Meet Joe Davis, a poet living in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and his colleague, Dave Scherer.
All rise for the cause, healing for the nation, and justice for us all.
Dave, aka Agape, is a hip-hop artist, also living in Minneapolis. And you can find these two on stage touring nationally in non-COVID times. But beyond their passion for music and art, they are educators, who work with individuals and organizations to develop inclusive, anti-racist, and adaptive practices.
What's up, Dave? Freeze! Wait, I don't know if he wants to like give me daps just because I'm black. You know, sometimes people want to do that, or if he wants to give me a hug.
Wait, does he want me to do like the handshake and the hug? Because I've seen some of my black friends do that, and that looks really cool.
Together, they teach as beloved community consulting. In a previous life in youth ministry for the Lutheran Church, I was lucky enough to work with both these men on several occasions.
I love being your friend. I learn something new every single day. You teach me all the time, but I don't want you to have to always be my teacher.
I appreciate you saying that, man. That's real. Like, there's some days I don't want to go that deep. I don't want to do that emotional labor. But, you know, there's some work that you got to do with other white people.
Tonight, they join us from Minneapolis to share about their experiences and work in the wake of the death of George Floyd. Please welcome Joe Davis and Dave Scherer to the Leadership Library. It's good to see your faces. I haven't seen you guys, I think, in person for quite a while. Joe, you and I met in St. Louis, and Dave, you and I go way back because of a mutual colleague, John Holt. And I hate the reason we're connecting today, but it's good to see your faces. How are you both doing?
Yeah, we're holding up all right. Yes, it's always good to see good people and connect in spite of the circumstances. So grateful to be here.
Yeah, there's heaviness in the city, and yet there are moments of joy. And you see, you know, civil rights leaders that laughed together and had barbecues together, and the balance is always there, the beauty and the pain together side by side. And that's where I'm at right now.
Fellows, we're about 10 days removed. George Floyd was laid to rest today, had his memorial service today. 10 days ago on a Monday evening, his life was taken from him. Can you start there and paint a picture of the reality that you both experienced since last Monday?
When I first learned about it, I was actually writing in the morning, and I was writing like about love and the power of love, and like I was kind of in this mood of like, yeah, I'm trying to just spread that message of hope and healing. And then I actually admittedly, I didn't watch the entire video because I was like, for the sake of my sanity and mental health, I have a personal commitment to myself to not watch Black death be perpetuated. Like, I just can't take it. I can't watch videos. I've already seen too many. But I saw articles and I saw like a still shot of the video. And I thought to myself, here it goes again. And I just like wrote something on social media about, you know, I was writing about love before, but I'm still gonna write about it. But at this time, it's like that radical, revolutionary, transformative love, a love like fire, right? And that's what I'm feeling. I'm still feeling that now, even as I'm reflecting on that moment when I first learned about it. But I didn't imagine in that moment that it would turn into this movement. And a week later, it doesn't feel like it's just been a week. It feels like it's been months prior.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, you know, Joe and I have different social locations. So when, you know, whereas he's really like trying to preserve his own sanity and stay not comfortable, but stay, you know, grounded. For white bodies, I think the journey can be a little bit different. So for me, the struggle was to stay in the discomfort, to watch as much as I could. And it's not that we need to watch it, but for me, it's been holding that discomfort. And I thought about the adaptive leadership model. One of our colleagues kind of uses a very similar graph of kind of our mobilizing defenses, our immobilizing defenses, and then kind of staying in that, you know, productive, what is it Heifetz that calls it like the green,
productive zone. Yeah, beautiful.
Productive zone. And it's similar for our bodies, right? If we go too high to activation, we're not helpful because we just want to fight or flight. But if we collapse, you know, down here and we're not mobilized enough. So how do we stay in this thing? And that's been my journey, is like going like this. Oh, that's too much. Okay. Well, that's not enough. And trying to ride that wave. That's been part of my journey over the last week.
Yeah. And I want to get into that. I wonder if you both paint a picture of the city that you're both present in right now. as you've seen it over the last 10 days? Because I'm not sure that everybody's seen the same city depending on where they get their sources. So would you just give us give us a firsthand idea of what you've witnessed during this time?
Yeah, it's interesting to see the outside perspective of the news and other folks who haven't been like in the city. But yeah, we've definitely had protests. We've definitely had, there was some property damage, and there was, just it's so much to even try to capture. But I really, what I want to lift up is that in the midst of all of that, how much of the community I've seen come together. Like immediately after, even when things were kind of going up in flames, I saw like my friends were trying to protect some of the buildings and trying to protect other people. And even afterwards, like my neighborhood was sweeping and cleaning, and we've had so many drives and so many collection sites for food and for clothes. And it's like, it's helping what's been lost, but it's also helping folks who are already experiencing homelessness and people who are already struggling to get their needs met. And so that's one of the biggest things I've seen, is how the community has risen up to fill the gaps that were already there, right? Because this is all that's happening now is a response to a long history of systemic racism and violence and oppression. And now that as the community is still trying to heal, we're starting to be activated and take like transformative action and really start to meet the needs that were already there. And that's what I've seen happen and what's still happening. Just one example of that is like in my block, we gathered around outside my apartment, like people even from just beyond this block, they came together and we were like sitting on chairs, still practicing physical distancing. And we were just like introducing ourselves, making sure everybody in the neighborhood knows each other. And then people were, we started chanting about George Floyd. And then we started singing. One of the pastors in the community said a prayer. We had some popsicles, and we were like just coming together in a beautiful way that I don't think ever would have happened, if not for these unfortunate, devastating, tragic circumstances. But there's been some healing and some transformation I think is coming from it. So.
Yeah, I mean, like you say, the danger of a single story is really present here. And so when you think about, as Joe mentioned, our city has a history, and the neighborhood I live in is a product of that history. There have been a lot of, there was redlining and restrictive housing covenants all throughout Minneapolis. I live in a primarily white neighborhood in South Minneapolis. And so it's interesting because like white folks in this neighborhood, we're having trouble mobilizing around issues of white supremacy and racism. Some people have known about these restrictive housing covenants, like in the deeds of the house since, before this all happened. Well, this happens, people they started mobilizing, and so now it's been interesting. Now that there was rumors of white supremacists that were going around and setting fires on houses here, and all of a sudden everybody wanted to mobilize. Isn't that funny how when our own safety felt threatened, all of a sudden we want to mobilize. So now there has been mobilization, and people are there's going to be we're working on a meeting where everyone who is going to look at their deed, and they're going to change those restrictive covenants. In some ways that's symbolic, but it's important because it hopefully indicates deeper desire to change and be better neighbors, because Minneapolis has a history of not being neighborly to people of color.
And sadly, Dave, that's a story in a lot of cities. As we know, Kansas City has a very sad and long story with the same redlining, and the streets still exist. And so many cities have work to do. And fellas, I think some of the work starts with sitting in the mess. And unfortunately, when your skin is white, I think the privilege, among many other things, is sometimes you don't have to sit in that mess. You can ignore that mess. So there's a time to sit in the mess. And for whatever reason, you may feel different. I feel like more people have been forced to sit in the mess on with the death and murder of George Floyd. So other than sitting in the mess, where do you all see the work beginning here 10 days since the death of George Floyd?
Telling white folks to stick with it, like not to let this be a flash in the pan, like, oh, we're gonna have a lot of energy around this because we see it on the news, or we see it even in our communities. But this is something that I don't have a choice to opt out of. Like, this is my daily experience. And so like, I'm committed to seeing racial justice and collective liberation. But I want white folks to really get that and not just think about that, but to embody that and get that in their hearts and in their spirits, and say, this is about, like, have a self-interest to where they see themselves. You know, we have the story of when one part of the body suffers, the whole body suffers, right? If one is bound, none are free. We can say that and intellectualize that, but how do we really live that and embody that? And that's what I want white folks to get, to do this work in whatever ways they can. It doesn't mean they always have to be out on the front lines at a protest. As a matter of fact, they can be serve a better purpose by talking to their white friends and white family and disrupting racism whenever they can. And I think the work is for a lot of marginalized people, Black and brown people and indigenous people. I think we got to rest. We got to take care of ourselves. We got to heal. I think that's our work. I really do. I think at all costs, we got to continue to, like, protect our spirits and to be able to flourish and to get old and have babies and, you know, live beautiful, full lives, because that hasn't been happening. It's been cut short by police violence and white supremacy. And so, like, you know, I talked to Dave about this, and I'm gonna kick it to you too, brother, to, you know, share your experience. But, like, white folks got to keep stepping up and stay in for the long haul, because that's what it's gonna take. If Black folks could have ended racism by ourselves, we would have done it already. And so we need our white fam to join us in this fight and to stay in this fight.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, the analogy that has been helpful recently, it's not an analogy, but, like, I mean, growing up in a house of addicts, you know, and I learned addictive behavior, and the addiction is internalized white superiority, right? And so when you breathe that in every day, when you swim in that water, it's really, really hard. It took me 43 years to develop this addiction to whiteness, and it's going to take a while to keep, you know, to unlearn it. And I literally a week into this, you know, I had a friend over and we had a little picnic yesterday, and we start just kind of getting into this comfortable life, goofing around, giggling. You know, I saw a person of color walk down the street, gave a kind of a friendly, carefree, "Hey, what's up?" And he just looked at me like, "Do you even know what's going on, like, right now?" And so I can slide into white comfort so quickly. I mean, and so I need community. I need accountability. I need the power of God. That's my own spirituality. I need my higher power, whatever your language is. But we have to have that, because it's so seductive. My friend always says, how do you fight a system that loves you back every day? And that's what we're asking people to do. So it's hard work. It is. But it's important work, like life or death work. So.
Yeah, Dave, let me talk to you for a sec. So we do this weird dance, right, where we're like, hey, Joe's got to teach us so that we can be allies, and, like, but I don't want to be awkward about it. So I need Joe to help me. And Joe, I heard you say, like, I need to rest. And I think that's so freaking well said. So what does that balance look like when we know it's not as clean as, like, today will be a day when you will help me understand what it means to be a person of color and what privilege I might even recognize. But tomorrow I need that. I mean, how do we start to talk about this in a way that the work seems incremental and manageable, and maybe we make some progress?
In my mind, you know, like, I just take our relationship, you know, me and Joe as a microcosm. Like, it's not like, I learned so much from Joe, right? Like, I just can't tell you how valuable it is. But hopefully most days it's not like this transactional thing of, like, Joe, let me extract your information so I can be more woke, or so, you know, it comes up, and I feel like part of the issue is like, if we don't have a relationship, white folks, if we don't have a relationship with people of color, which statistically speaking we don't, then it does feel transactional. It does feel, you know, colonial, like, hey, just give me your information, or hey, so how do we develop authentic relationships so that it's a give and take, it's mutual, it's, you know, that's what I think that's part of the work.
When I hear white folks who I don't have a relationship with, like, reach out to me and ask me, like, how can they help? What can they do? Like, I appreciate the gesture, but it's like, are you reaching out to me because I'm like the only Black person you could think about? Like, do you have no relationship, no proximity to like people of color in your life? You're so disconnected and detached that you have to, like, because there've been people who have contacted me that are from college and from high school that I haven't spoken to in years. My inbox and my social media and my text messages have been flooded, by people reaching out to me. And like, I get it. And I'm grateful for like what sometimes seems to be a genuine concern and care. I appreciate that. But what is exhausting is when they're always asking, like, what can I do? And it's like, I've been telling you what to do for years. Like, I've always been unapologetic about like saying, this is like where we're at, this is what's going on. Have you been paying attention? Right? And why am I the one like person that you remembered to reach out to? Like, don't you have other friends and family and people in your sphere that you're connected to? And I think therein speaks to the problem, right? There has to be a deeper, authentic connection, as Dave, spoke to. And when that happens, I think some of this transformation will start to, there'll be more transformation.
And I think as you'll appreciate this because you're a leadership guru, but our friend says that culture eats strategy for breakfast, right? And so white people need to create a culture. We need to start having more symbols and music and things that that invite people into this work. Because if we don't have a community to rely on, like I have a group of people that I do this work with. It's 6 white men and we all do and dismantle white body supremacy together. So this is where we can cry together. This is without asking Joe to be our, comforter. This is where we can ask dumb questions without, committing microaggressions against Joe. And if you don't have a space like that, it's really hard to get anywhere. So now I know that like when I'm gonna, agitate in a meeting, I know there's 5 other people who have my back and I can go to them. I can learn from them. This is what it might look like to risk some of your power in a meeting for the sake of others. This is what it might look like to disrupt unjust, things that are happening. So white folks need more of that. And we don't have a lot of that. I mean, if you want to be a white supremacist, there's a whole culture to invite you into. You can there's websites, there's like cool sayings. They wear like Hawaiian shirts. They do, it's like, if I'm a young person, I'm like, I want to be a part of that, man. Get, the togetherness feels really good. Well, what are somatic abolitionists like we're trying to be? What's that culture look like? What are the shirts that we wear? What's the invitation that we have?
It was really good to hear. I'm just going to name from President Barack Obama yesterday, and just the reminder, one of my favorite lines, he said, "This nation was founded on protest," and protest was never about people being comfortable. So I laugh sometimes. Look, there's an end of this with the violence, and there's some of that, right? We know the reason for that, the flight, flee, fight response, right? When things get too hot. But this is a nation founded on only things change when things are uncomfortable. Things only change when things are uncomfortable. This moment feels different, as I mentioned earlier. You can actually poll in like 70% of people say they're behind these protests, whereas I think it only got up to 25% ever in Ferguson. And numbers are numbers. So I wonder if is this different? Would you both end there? And if so, what gives you hope moving forward?
Yeah, I definitely feel that this is different. Like on a very deep level, like having gone to some peaceful protests and being surrounded by people of every race and every age, in solidarity together, just shouting about like justice and peace, like that that invigorated me and inspired me. And then furthermore, like seeing that type of energy, that happening all over the world, like not only all over the country, but all over the world, right? Where folks are starting to come together over like violence and oppression and saying, we're not going to take it anymore, because it's been so, there's such an emergent awakening. Like it's so clear. You can't look away now. You can't deny the realities of racism. And so folks are saying, hey, we're not going to take it anymore all over the world. I've never seen it happen in such a mass movement as it is now. And so that's what's giving me hope. And for me, I'm like, how can we continue this, right? Build on that momentum and make sure that it's not just gonna, and I don't think it's gonna fade away for most of us. But how can, for those who are still on the fence, like the movable middle, like how can we bring them deeper relationship and into deeper work? And that's kind of where I'm at right now, is just thinking on that and working on that, and it's gonna happen. That's what's carrying me forward. Like my ancestors have had so much resilience that they passed on to me. Like they've been here and done that. They survived, and I'm here right now because of them. And if they could do it, I know we could do it. So we're gonna be all right.
You know, when you do organization development, one of the sayings I hear is, you know, you go from changing the chart and changing the heart, right? You can change the org chart, but you also have to change the heart of an organization. And I think as those two work together, I mean, I think some people, maybe we overemphasize changing the heart and we realize the org charts still look the same. You know, the police, you know, the unjust systems that are in the police and education, healthcare, all these disparities, and even the systems that created those outcomes are still in place. And if you do the same old thing, you'll get the same old results. So as the system is designed to get the results it's currently getting, we need folks whose hearts have been changed to change the charts as well.
I can't thank you both enough. You're both busy. You're both in the work, and I got to be honest, this feels less important than all the work you're doing. And I hope what this can be is a chance for, you know, an audience to see you all and the work you're doing being present in the city. And in that vein, you're both artists during a pandemic. I imagine that is not easy work. So my real last question is, if people want to support you, how can they support you?
So you can definitely check out my website, joedavispoetry.com. Also have a Patreon. If you go to patreon.com, that's patreon.com /Joe Davis Poetry. You can support me and my work and just contribute.
Yeah, and if you want to definitely just support Joe if you can, but also if you want to hire the two of us to come and do some of this work that we do with organizations and individuals trying to move the needle, you can contact us. hiphopoutreach.com is my website. You'll find something called Beloved Community Consulting. That's us on there. And so, yeah, thank you for having us. And I just want you to know, this is the work. Like, this is a big part of the work, actually. I mean, we're talking to people right now listening that probably might not be sure, might be on the fence, might agree with everything, but not really feel emboldened to do anything about it. So we're talking to you, whoever you are listening, like, be bold. Like, people sometimes elevate me and Joe to be like super woke. Like, we call ourselves half woke. Like, we're still works in progress. And especially me as a white body person, I screw up all the time still. So don't think of us as like, oh, I could never do that work. Like, no, I'm still learning. I'm still a baby, actually. And so don't use that as an excuse to not start doing the work.
Thank you, guys. Joe, Dave, thanks so much for being here. I can't thank you enough. Welcome back to the desk. And I just want to share on the way out here that I felt like it was appropriate and important to show that interview in total. We sat down for about 25 minutes, and other than the pleasantries on the front end and the back end, you saw the whole conversation. Appreciate those guys a lot. Those guys mean a lot to me, the work they're doing, and they've been nothing but supportive along the way in the work that I did back in the day, and continue to be supportive. I just want to share that we're going to continue this conversation in the Zoom room. So if you're in a place where you want to have a conversation about what you just heard, join us tonight on our after party. Julian's going to post that link right now. There it is. Julian always right behind me. I appreciate it. And we're going to have that conversation there. All right. So many great comments tonight. I've got a list of notes here, but if you're in the mood for whatever reason to have a conversation, join us in the Zoom room. If you're done for the night, I get it. My encouragement to you is think about what your part of the work is. I know I'm doing that for myself, and I'm speaking to myself here. My youngest, Parker, right? Leadership from a 6-year-old that changes to leadership from a 7-year-old starting today. He turned 7 today. And I paused. I had to think about what his life will be like moving forward. And my prayer for him, my prayer for Addison, and my prayer for all of us is that we'll sit in this mess and we'll find a way forward. This time, beyond all imagination, this time will be different. And we have a lot of work to do. I have a lot of work to do, and I invite you to that work. Thank you for joining us tonight. And as always, I leave you with our moments of hope. Good evening.